Hello and welcome to an episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. In today's episode, we welcomed on John Fitzgerald, the CEO of SuperNode, a business based in Dublin that's building a brand new factory in Belize in the northeast. This was a real fascinating episode where I learned a lot, and you will as well, about the superconducting industry. So we talked in detail about exactly what that was, how that is linked to climate change, why the business was set up in the first place to tackle some real serious issues behind that and decarbonisation. And we talk in detail about the risks of not acting now and people not making a stand and making a real difference with this. And it was real serious, interesting stuff that we talk about. We debunk some myths. We talk about the UK industry as a whole and actually the opportunity the UK has right now over countries like China, and we debunk some myths around it as well. So this is a real fascinating episode where you're going to learn something new. You're definitely going to learn something new about a very interesting topic, which is definitely going to be crucial if we're going to meet the demands we need to meet. So thank you, John, for educating me and educating everyone else today on this episode. Please sit back and watch or listen, whatever you want to do. And as ever, please just click that like and subscribe button now. It really helps grow the channel and get fantastic guests on like John today. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the episode. Massive warm welcome today to John Fitzgerald, the CEO of SuperNode, based in Dublin, but actually building a site in the northeast in Belize. And I'm fascinated to talk through all that. But firstly, welcome, John. How are you?
Yeah, quite good, Mark. How are you keeping?
Yeah, very good. I'm looking forward to this one. This one is going to be something which is going to test me. It's some real interesting stuff that I don't know a great deal about, which I always find fascinating. So I'm gonna learn just like everyone else today, which is great and really important stuff for manufacturing. Before I do that, I ask everyone the same question when they first come on, which is, what does it mean to you, John, to be a leader? What do you say?
Yeah, well, I'm around a while now, so I've worked under a few different styles and types of leadership, and I guess the first thing is there's a vision or a mission somewhere where you want to go, and then it's having followers and inspiring them and empowering them to bring you there, and that's the game. That's what leadership means to me.
I'm hearing more and more now about the vision piece, and I think it's great, and I think you need to tie people into it. But I don't think I used to hear that much about vision and strategy unless I were just blind to it. But do you think companies are now looking more into that vision piece? Or what's your thoughts on that?
A little bit. I don't really, we're a startup. So SuperNode is a tech startup to deliver technology for a decarbonized world. So it's quite a powerful vision that we have, and our mission is to deliver the next generation of, technology for that. So it's quite empowering.
Yeah.
It's quite. I'd say most businesses is just turn a profit, and there are different levels of vision in different companies. I'd say we're at the higher end of the vision spectrum, if you like, in terms of importance to the business, because we're a startup. We're pre-revenue.
And I actually think there's a lesson there already, because I've had this conversation quite a few times this year about companies who are dealing with sustainability and the desire, and actually probably I'll go further than that, a demand now for the new generation to want to work for companies who are ethically moving in the right direction, doing the right things, but actually have a purpose to it. And I don't think that used to be the case. I think that the job for life was a stable company. It's going to pay the wages for X amount. Now the new generation, in my opinion, want to work for companies who are doing something like you. Have you found that people are joining you because of that?
Well, a particular type, or I guess it depends on what motivates you, and a lot of the people who are attracted to companies like SuperNode are people who want to be challenged and welcome and are happier being challenged. And there are plenty of jobs in Ireland, for instance, with pretty much full employment. So if you want a job where you're not so challenged. You can stay in your lane. And I like to think of it as comfortable miserableness.
Like that.
So here it's challenged happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. No, I like it a lot. Let's understand and learn a little bit more about the business and what it does, please, John, if that's okay. Because I want to educate people on you to educate people, not me, on the sort of technology behind it. So you've obviously briefly touched on SuperNode, what they do. What is the technology, and how would you explain it to someone who doesn't perhaps understand that world?
Well, I'd start with the vision. So the vision is that everyone should have access to secure, affordable, and renewable energy. So it's all about decarbonizing and enabling that transition away from fossil fuels. That's pretty much why we exist. And then you kind of dig into it a bit and say, okay, that's fine. That's a vision. So what do you do? Well, we look at the market and we say, what are the barriers and where are the opportunities? Because it's a two-sided coin. Where are the opportunities? And we see the grid as being the big enabler of decarbonisation, but also the single biggest constraining factor is the grid. So our technology is our tech play is developing better grid technology that can be deployed quickly underground, small spaces, and that can be done at scale and pace so that we can transition away from fossil fuels without having too much large infrastructure pylons, all over the place, and we can have a seamless transition away from fossil fuels, if you like.
And how much of an impact does that, if that works, and I'm sure it will do, have on the climate if this becomes the norm, would you say?
Huge, massive. So if you look at the UK, it was probably the first major economy to develop coal resources and have an industrial revolution. And now it's one of the first major developed economies to move away from coal-fired generation. So there's been a huge transition already. If you think about fossil fuels and how many of them come from outside our borders here in Europe, all that wealth transfer outside our economies, doesn't create too many jobs in our economies. So if you have, good quality jobs developing renewable technologies, generation, offshore, onshore, solar, all the electrification projects, heat pumps and all of that can be which are good, high quality jobs that can be delivered within the economy with electrification. And then you look at the benefits on the social side in terms of reduced carbon emissions associated with decoupling carbon emissions from economic development. That's huge. And that's needed if we're going to hit our Paris 2012 targets. So I think there's a real opportunity to address the challenge of our times, which is climate change, but also to enrich our economies while we do so.
What's the risk, in your opinion, of this not working? If this didn't work, what's the risk, would you say?
Are you talking about SuperNode technology specifically, or the transition?
The transition, yeah.
Yeah, the transition. Yeah, the risks are significant, and there's a lot of vested interests, companies whose business models are entirely predicated upon the carbon economy, and they have deep pockets, and they have been busy at COP, and they have been busy at policy level, trying to avoid becoming stranded and to continue making lots of money out of fossil fuels.
Okay, I'm with you.
So, and if we continue to do that, we're going to see, there are people better qualified than I to tell us what happens if we have 2-3 degree increase on pre-industrial level temperatures. We're talking about,
scary stuff.
Scary stuff, scary stuff. It's apocalyptic at this stage, and we see that. We're feeling it already. It's
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, it was tomorrow, but today, it is today. It's happening. It's happening all around us. Weather events, Spain. It mightn't happen in Ireland or in the UK this year, but within a year or two, where we have a major weather event, and we'll be saying that's terrible, and what do we do about it? And
Yeah.
I guess the immediacy of it. It is a challenge. So it is quite scary what'll happen if we don't do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very bad outcome. And the
Yeah.
sooner, the easier it'll be on ourselves.
It is scary stuff, and I think probably generation. I don't. I think new generation is different. But I think generations before them, including myself in it, there's a mentality of not. I think there was almost there's people trying to scaremonger under this, and there's the change of weather. People just go, oh, it's because of climate change, and people never really got it. And I feel like things are starting to turn now, where people are actually taking things seriously and quite rightly getting quite concerned by what could happen because I've got young kids, and it might not affect me in my lifetime, but it will definitely affect them and their kids. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's that generation.
Yeah, it's a social responsibility thing, is to try and leave things at least as good as you found them, if not better.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we can't continue to enjoy a pretty privileged lifestyle, like we do in these parts of the world, while at the same time respecting um, um, Mother Nature, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Like
Yeah.
that, there are like you can decouple economic growth from the consumption of materials. It's we can do it. We have the technologies. It just takes a bit of effort, you know.
Well, I think what you're doing is fantastic. So thank you for that. 'Cause it's very important. What needs to happen, or who needs to be convinced, if you like, to get this work? Is it the average person? Is it business owners? Is it government, or a bit of a mix? What needs to happen for this sort of thing to be the norm now?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a mix. It's everybody. It's you and me, and it's the politicians we vote for, and it's the governments that are made up by those politicians. So it's the whole shooting match. I think the UK has to be said. The UK is probably one of the best exemplars of how to start decarbonizing,
Oh,
and they have good plans, and I think they compare favorably with others in terms of being in a leadership position to decarbonize. You've got the um, uh, national grid, looking at a project to transform the national grid and to double its capacity to move electricity around. And I think it's called the Great Grid Upgrade. And that's really positive. And that's the right place to be at, and to be tackling those issues. And you've got like huge strides made in the North Sea with the deployment of offshore renewables, and it's more of that. It's more of that, and I think the UK is probably one of the leading proponents of decarbonisation, I would say.
right. Good. Do, is it a case of government needs to more capital and support, or is it a case of getting stricter on people and companies to meet certain requirements by a certain amount of time? Would you say?
Yeah, I want to be careful because I'm not primarily a climate change advocacy person. I'm more of a tech development person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've got to be careful, or I'll end up talking about the climate piece all the time. I think it's like, if there are incentives to put up solar panels, and the cost of solar panels falls by 50%, then does the incentive fall away? And that's typically what happens, is government don't want to give people the solar panels too cheap. But I actually think the incentive should stay just as strong, even though the price is falling. And let's have more of it. I think everybody who has an electric car shouldn't be worried about its resale value. And I think the people with diesel and petrol cars they should be pretty much told, regardless what happens in world markets, these prices are going north. and they're going north fast. So get yourself an electric car and we'll help you buy it, and we'll subsidize because it's a no-brainer to get electric cars if you've got an abundance of electricity. And I think the small signals, you need very strong signals to transition away from in transport, which is probably a good example from carbon. Fossil fuels, you need strong signals. So I think electrification of the car fleet and strong signals to consumers to make the cars more affordable, not just for the rich. They should be available for everybody. They should have a resale value. Should be networks built out, and it's a no regret situation, and it would help greatly with emissions. So stuff like that could be done in nearly every country in Europe.
Yeah, it's good advice, and this is it. You know, people like yourself, you know, to be talk about this sort of stuff. It's really important because I think a lot of people need to listen. Let's talk about the tech. Let's talk about the company. Why did the journey start? What sort of brought you to where you are now with SuperNode? I want to talk about the early part.
Yeah, well, there's lots of early parts of my stage in life. I started off working in a control room, keeping the lights on, forecasting demand and making sure people had electricity when they needed it. And then from there, I went on to developing power stations, interconnectors, overhead transmission lines, connecting data centers, interconnectors to countries like the first one significant was the East-West Interconnector, which was from near Dublin to just Deeside near Liverpool. And that was quite a significant piece of equipment, connected two markets for the first time, put downward pressure on prices in Ireland, and allowed trade that didn't happen before. So effectively, you could see the benefits very quickly in Ireland, the smaller country, and it was delivered phenomenal value, reduced prices by about 14% in its first full year of operation, and also it allowed the renewable sector to grow a bit quicker. So it facilitated the growth in renewables. So you can see there that giving electrons a passport is a big deal. And beforehand, it's hard to believe that we didn't trade directly electricity between Ireland and the UK. We didn't have a direct link before that. And if you think about how efficient it is to move electricity between countries, we don't have enough infrastructure, and electricity and electrons up until very recently have been a national commodity, not an international commodity. So if you're going to rely on renewables, Mark, they're not dispatchable. The wind blows a lot of the time, but not all the time. The sun shines half the time if you're lucky in particular parts of the world. So you need a total solution that will enable security of supply with the 99.9% security of supply without fossil fuels. So you need more wires, you need more batteries, you need more, you need renewables, some nuclear, and you can do it. It's doable. It's eminently doable, but you do need that infrastructure. So that infrastructure is hard to build, takes time, and there's not a lot of it around. So if you're going to get rid of all your oil and gas supply lines, you're going to need more electricity interconnectors to trade electricity in its place and bring it to where the people want the energy, which is in your cities and your towns and factories and so on. So SuperNode looked at that and saw an issue with the ability of the toolbox that the utilities had in terms of, if you have a problem, if you're in Leeds and you want more electricity for a data center, or you want to build a new renewable plant, then how do they deliver that? And the tools available, they're okay, but if you want to double or triple the amount of power you move around because people are driving electric cars and using heat pumps and more data centers and so on, then those tools are going to struggle. At the moment, about 25% of energy is in the form of electricity, and to decarbonize, that needs to become north of 75% and probably closer to 90%. Okay. So that's probably 3 times more electricity as our final source of energy, as opposed to gas or any other form of energy. And that means we need better solutions to do more, move more power from A to B, Mark. And superconductors can do that. In fact, a superconductor can move 5 to 10 times more power than a conventional cable. So it's an ideal tool for the utilities to enable them to make the transition.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That was our motivation to get into them, and that's why we've been developing them. And we now have a full-scale prototype in the UK being assembled in Belize, actually, which is a fantastic location for us. We've opened a facility there earlier this year, and it's now it's where we assemble our latest prototype, and it will be capable of doing 5 to 10 times what a traditional cable of comparable voltage could do, which means you can have a cable in your road as opposed to huge infrastructure and substations and maybe even overhead lines, which are contentious and difficult to build because people don't really want to welcome overhead bulky infrastructure into their communities because they're not the prettiest, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, this could be massive, couldn't it? And, you know, you're talking cat's eye sort of size.
Yeah, well, it certainly could. I want to be very clear. I think copper and aluminium are conductors that have served us for 100 years, and they'll continue to serve us. And this isn't going to replace them. What it's going to do is it's going to augment them. It's going to add to them, and it's going to give the utilities, the distribution network operators, the national grids of the world, it's going to give them the capability to deliver more capacity quickly, to keep pace with the pace of building out renewable wind farms, you know, and building out data centers. At the moment, the queues and the backlogs that system operators have and utilities have around the world are incredible. There's gigawatts of demand and generation in queues trying to get access to the grid, and the grid isn't big enough. And that is a huge issue, and it's costing a lot of money for consumers. So if you've got a few gigawatts of wind turned down because there's no network for it to accommodate it, that's money that's consumers have paid, and they can't realize the benefits of that investment. So that's a big issue everywhere. So we can help build our grid, and that's what we aim to do.
Yeah, excellent. And why Blythe, would you say, in terms, you know, I know there's a lot happening there, but I imagine, you know, there's various places you could have put the factory. What was the thought process behind that?
3 reasons. Number one, it's a can-do part of the country in terms of there's a great tradition of industry there. But also the offshore renewable energy catapult is located there, and a number of so we can do our testing of our full-scale prototype in the phenomenal facilities that they have available there to the cable industry.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's the supply chain. So a good bit of the supply chain where we put together our prototypes is based in the UK. So we have partners in Southampton and Leicester. And so we actually make a good bit of the prototype in the UK. So it makes sense to assemble it there and test it there. So it was an easy sell. And lastly, is just the language. So like we're all English speakers, so it's easy for us to do business. And and the lads like going over to the UK and spending time. And we've got, we've had a tremendous welcome there, and we're so pleased to be located in Blythe and delivering on our mandate there.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast with a very quick 30-second description of my business. Theo James are an engineering and manufacturing recruitment search firm based in Durham. We specialise in contract and permanent opportunities from blue-collar, semi-skilled roles right the way up to C-suite level exec positions. If you're looking for any new additional staff or new opportunity for yourself in the industry, please contact me or the team. There'll be a specialist in your area waiting to help. I'm incredibly proud of this business and what we've built since our inception in 2015, and I would love to extend that service out to you. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the episode.
So really happy about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, how the sort of local community have welcomed you, because you're absolutely right. You know, that there's so much heritage and history up in Northumberland, and I don't think, well, if you're from the northeast, I don't think you really understand it until you experience it, and it's such a community, family feel. Have you felt that when you've been there? Because it's different.
Absolutely, no, it's been really good, and we've neighbours JDR, and we've been to visit them, and also we've been into the Catapult Centre to see their the labs they have, the high voltage labs, and we've tested we've had 3 rounds of testing this year in their labs, and we found it really really good, really positive, and we're delighted with the UK experience, and we also work with some of the universities, mainly Strathclyde University as well. So there's a lot of linkages we've developed over the years in the UK, and I suppose to add to that is the fact that the UK is so serious about upgrading their grid. So we're hoping to have some good conversations, and we've started some with some of the major utilities in the UK. And what we'd love to do is to not only test our prototypes, we'll do a full-scale test down in Deeside, in National Grid's Innovation Centre in Deeside next summer, where we run a cable at much higher current than is possible with conventional, just to demonstrate the technology. That will be called the SHINE project, and that's an acronym for Superconducting High Current Innovation for Network Enhancement. So it's pretty much a short way of saying what we're about. And after that, we'd like to do a demonstration project with pilot with one of the utilities in the UK. So not only would we like to demonstrate it, we'd like to pilot it and put it into the system somewhere in the UK, because there's a big need, and we need to trial it somewhere to grow confidence in it, because we need something that's eminently reliable. Yeah. And
obviously reliability is very important. The cost, I imagine, will be very important to businesses. Is it something that could be quite cost effective in that regard as well, or is it balanced between the two?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the cables is it's effectively what you're doing is you're keeping a superconductor that can convey 5 to 10 times the current of equivalent copper. You're keeping it at minus 200 Celsius in liquid nitrogen. So you pipe and pipe technology, and we've developed patented technology to do that cheaper than anybody else. But I'm not going to tell you that it's cheaper than a copper and aluminium cable. It's not. Where it is cheaper is when you're looking at a total solution. So if you've got to connect 2 parts of, I mentioned Leeds earlier. I've never been in Leeds City. I've been in Leeds Airport a few times. But if you're somewhere like Leeds and you need to move power across the city, and you need to move so much power that you have to build new substations, transformers, and you have to buy some real estate, and it causes a lot of, let's say, issues for local communities and businesses. It might become something that you can't even do. Well, a superconductor could possibly do that project at, a fraction of the voltage with the existing right of way and way leave without the substations. So the cable itself will be much more expensive, but the overall solution can be much cheaper and much more effective. So urban congestion is a real use case for pinch points, a real use case for superconductors, where the cable will be more expensive, but the overall solution won't be. And then you get into bigger grids. If the national grid want to upgrade the system and put in, 3+ gigawatt links to move power north to south and east to west, as the case may be, at that level, which is more than any city would need, but it's what needs to be transported around the country, then the superconductor will be cheaper than a copper or aluminium solution, except for overhead. Overhead lines are always cheaper. I wouldn't claim to be cheaper than an overhead line, but I haven't ever met anyone who built one, because they haven't been built in about 30 years.
Yeah.
They're very hard to build. I think they did one in Scotland about 10 years ago, and it took about 20 years.
Oh, really?
And it was not in a very populous area. They're very difficult to build anywhere in Europe, for sure. So the grid we have today in most of Europe and in the UK was built in the 1950s, 60s.
Mm-hmm.
There hasn't been much grid built since then.
Yeah, fair.
I could stand corrected. There might be one or two in the 80s, but it's been pretty much a fixed asset that's just been upgraded and maintained. Yeah,
it's fascinating. It's fascinating because these are things that, who could tell you how many overheads that they've seen on the way to work? You can't. You don't notice these things, do you? But it's fascinating.
I spent about 6 years developing overhead lines, and the ones that exist already, no problem. You try and put one where there isn't one already. That is very difficult.
It's fascinating because what you've seen there as well, you've seen the other side. So you've seen that, obviously, you've seen the challenge, and essentially you now got the solution, which is a perfect business model, isn't it? Because I think you need to understand what the challenge is before you start to build a solution.
Yeah, and what attracts us to the UK and what I like about the market there is that government and utilities are acknowledging the challenge and planning for it.
Yeah.
In a lot of other countries, they've got their head in the sand,
How about, manufacturing obviously is the core people listening to this. Everyone talks about China, obviously, and is that completely different to that, in terms of companies like that, it can do things typically cheaper and faster. Is that, or is it not on their agenda?
I'll try and unpack that. So in terms of jobs, what does this mean, the transition? And if you think about all the money that is spent on fossil fuels, if you're investing that in supply chains that have a local footprint, that's local jobs, that's a lot more money goes into the infrastructure to deliver it, and the fuel is free. So it's a different model, and you have to think about it differently. But I've been to places like Wick in the north of Scotland, and I've visited 5 or 6 years ago. I visited a large wind farm up there, and the town was literally transformed by the jobs, and not a huge number of jobs, but you're talking about a remote community, and there were high quality jobs associated with the Beatrice wind farm, the upgrade. I think it was an SSE project, but the Beatrice wind farm, there were a number of high quality jobs in a place where the fishing community had been decimated because herrings had been fished out years ago from the North Sea. So you can see positive stuff there, and that's an instance of it, and that can be replicated and has been replicated and can continue to be replicated. But also cable technology. There's a record amount of cable technology companies setting up in the UK. They'll all have jobs, and the whole electrification project, be it people, marketing, selling, installing, maintaining heat pumps, electric vehicles, infrastructure. There is a whole electrification economy that needs to be developed, explored, and it's an indigenous one. It's one where the jobs can be local, not all of the supply chain, but certainly key parts of it you can focus on. And it's the early movers will get them.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Where do you, if you look at the semiconductor industry, where do you see it realistically? What's your prediction for 10 years time from now, what do you see it looking like?
Well, the superconducting industry 10 years from now, I think there'll be more customers than an ability of the industry to service those customers.
Hmm.
Because I think there'll be a large project. There'll probably in Germany there's a large project which everybody's watching called the Superlink project, and NKT and some others are developing that project. And I want to give it a call out. It's a very important project. Um, I expect the Chinese will look at that and say, we have to do one of them really quickly,
Yeah.
because we want to be leaders in that technology. You'll see them popping up in other areas, and it's about being able to gear up to supply them. So I do think it will grow significantly in the next 10 years for sure. And then it's a question of, if the ambition of utilities and governments continues to grow and their confidence grows in electrification, then there's going to be big backbone circuits. I talk about 3 gigawatt links. It'll move away from urban congestion to being bulk power transfer over long distance. That becomes the game. And that's probably 10 years away from now. So I see it kind of developing in scale, because a superconductor, unless you have some constraint, a pinch point, a real estate issue, or whatever, their benefits, they really become cheaper when you move into the gigawatt territory. So if you can move a lot of power, it becomes twice as cheap doing it with a superconductor. So that's when it will really take off in its own right. And you're talking big grids in the US, in Europe, in the UK, right across the piece. You're talking about big backbone infrastructure. And that's a bit of a leap and a hop now, some people would say. Well, I think if we do the urban congestion thing and people get comfortable with the technology, it's even easier to do the long distance stuff. It's easier than ironically, it's an easier technology to deliver.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
it is. It's simpler. DC is simpler. Um, um, it's just plus and minus as opposed to 50 hertz moving around. So fewer cables, fewer conductors. It's an easier cable story for sure. Yeah.
What about the workforce? What would you see if you look at maybe Blythe as an example, or just as workforce, this type of market expanding? The UK's got a bit of a war on talent now, and there's still a bit of a skill shortage, succession planning issues, loads of people leaving the industry, and not enough people getting trained. What type of workforce does this need to be? Is it a very technical, educated academia, or is it more hands-on tech? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on where you're at. Like, there'll always be product development, research and development, high-end jobs. Then you've got your manufacturing jobs, which are good jobs, like traditional cable factories, full-scale factory, maybe producing 400 kilometers of cable a year, might have something like, I don't know, 50 people, typical industrial processes, extrusion, wrapping, quality control, safety, all the stuff
Yeah.
that you'd associate with a cable factory,
Mhm.
similar footprint. So it'd be like a traditional cable factory. It would look the same on the outside, but it'd be different on the inside. And I think then you've got your project delivery and so on. So in of itself, you're talking hundreds of jobs. But in terms of what it enables, in terms of downstream and upstream, in terms of renewable generation, cost of electricity, ability to deliver, to satisfy the queues that exist at the door of every utility. Like, I don't know if people appreciate that most utilities have a backlog of requests for a connection.
Right. No, I didn't.
They're called the connection queues. They're gigawatts in the US. There's lots of them. There's actually almost an industry to process the queue.
Really crazy, isn't it?
There's been queue management innovation.
Yeah. It's just a world you just take for granted, isn't it? You switch your lights on, you switch your car, you just expect things to work, don't you?
You certainly do, and there's it's like everything. There's a lot more goes under the bonnet of a PC or a car than most punters appreciate, because they just want to send an email or check something and Google something or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to be done, but it's all doable, you know. And it's we've just become very reliant on a smooth running machine that keeps the lights on 24/7. And the only, and it's not a trivial issue with it, is it runs in carbon.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any, I've had a few people on the podcast before about, specifically about, EV automotive and that's, and I always ask this question in case there is, are there any myths that you've heard or people think of that you want to debunk? Common sort of misconceptions, would you say, about the industry?
About superconductivity?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's it's been placed in an exotic bucket, like fusion, nuclear fusion. I'm told has been 20 years away for the last 40 years. So nobody's got it to work commercially, and it's nearly there, and AI might help, and there's lots of projects, and it's a really promising, if it works, it's phenomenal, but it's still not working. Superconductivity works and has been working for 20 years. Anybody who's had an MRI has relied on a superconductor. They work 24/7. They're a fantastic technology. They're technically mature. So the technology is mature. It's keeping the lights on in loads of cities. Relatively not much of it, but it is working in maybe a dozen cities in the world. There's projects in Asia, in America, and in Europe. And there will be more. So this is not, I'd like to debunk the myth that this is a technology for the day after tomorrow. This is a technology for today and tomorrow, not the day after.
Yeah. And have you got a message to anyone at all who's listening? This could be anyone. It could be the average person driving a ice car. It could be someone connected to the government, whatever. Any messages you want to give to anyone listening, would you say, that you think will be important?
I hadn't thought about that, but I think it is possible to decarbonize without screwing up our economy. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
We can enhance, even improve the economy if we do it properly. And I think we just need to. We're at a stage now where China is decarbonizing at a faster rate than anybody else, probably. Yeah. I don't know that definitively, but it's a sense I have. Mm-hmm. They're going for it, and they're doing it because they're open to doing whatever it takes, and they're not wedded. And maybe it's because they don't have huge oil and gas reserves, but they're doing it without shedding much of a tear for the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
And I think the fossil fuel industry, they're powerful, they have deep pockets, and I think we need to be mindful that they could derail us by running us down some blind alleyways. And that's happened already with carbon capture and storage. And hydrogen. I think the hydrogen economy there's questions over how economic that can be. So if you want an efficient transition that's effective, electricity is your best bet. Efficiency and electricity. And I'm a big believer in electrification to decarbonize. And I would say invest in that. So you can see people already, Mark, the fuel cell car. I don't know anyone buying a fuel cell car. I know lots of people with electric cars. And the reason is because the efficiencies are just so much better.
Yeah.
The costs are so much better. The lifetime of the battery, everything is better than a fuel cell. The same is true of hydrogen vehicles. Again, I just think you got to do the basics, do the analysis, and electrification comes up as the best answer in almost every circumstance.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm 3.5 years into my electric car now, and I'm going to touch wood here, but so far not an ounce of bother. And I don't know anyone that's ever purchased an electric car then gone back to a non-electric. It just doesn't happen.
And Mark, if you think about it, if one of the big concerns, I've got an electric car too, and I'm on my second, but you kind of worry about resale value and
Yeah.
will the battery technology move on?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there was more certainty about the resale value, more people, and the cost was lower, more people would transition. And then you hear people saying we're going to put up barriers and charge more for Chinese cars to protect the European car industry. And you're going to go, so it's going to stay expensive to buy an electric car, and we're not going to transition away from fossil fuels.
Yeah.
You know, I think they need to have the carrot and the stick. They need to basically promote electric cars, hammer fossil fuel cars, but give people the alternative. Like, don't make, if electric cars are expensive and you hammer fossil fuels, then people have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
They can't afford an electric and they can't afford a fossil fuel because the cost's too high. So you gotta give people alternatives. And I think too many in the past that hasn't always been the case. And watch out for those the fossil fuel industry. I think they have a different agenda.
Yeah.
It's not decarbonizing, and it's not necessarily even the overall economy.
Yeah, that it's a real risk. I agree, because there's a massive percentage of people who just want to get to A to B and don't care how they get there, and that's the concern. They don't want to pay X amount for electric car. So it's trying to capitalize on that market to make that much more accessible and affordable.
Yeah. So our superconducting products will be able to move power at half the cost, at bulk power, big power at half the cost of traditional cable systems. They can be deployed without, causing minimal disruption and having a smaller footprint, and they can move energy efficiently. People don't want current, they don't want voltage, they want energy. They want it where and when they need it. That's a huge challenge for utilities, and we hope to work with utilities to give them something in their toolbox so that they can actually meet the needs of their customers into the future. And that's a big challenge for them. And we need to try that and pilot it with them in the coming years, so that in 5 years' time, if they have a critical need, they know they can reach into that toolbox and a superconductor is there if that's the appropriate answer. And in many cases, it will be.
100%. And just finally, John, what's the next sort of 12 to 18 months looking like for SuperNode then? I imagine loads of change and exciting stuff.
Yeah. Well, firstly, we're working with Green Giraffe on a funding process, because we want to bring in some more money to fund our continued expansion and development, particularly development. We're doing the Shine project in the National Grid Innovation Centre in the summertime. We're having discussions with a number of utilities and some cable companies around potential projects. And we need to get the right projects, if you like, a Goldilocks project, so we can invest in piloting our technology in a use case that has upside for utilities, but probably not too much downside, because they need to be 99.9% reliable. And so we will search and hopefully co-create a project with a utility, because they know where the use cases are. They know where the best use cases are. So we're just looking for those opportunities, and that's what the next few years looks like. And then once we have that traction and proof, it's into building out manufacturing capacity, or licensing the technology to someone else who'll do that, and try and realize a return for our investors who've been very supportive of us with what is pretty interesting. But this is not software, this is hard infrastructure development, which it takes a lot of guts to do. I have to say it takes a lot of guts to do innovation and infrastructure. So that's what the next few years look like. So we'll give it our all, and we look forward to meeting our milestones and satisfying some customers in the future.
Excellent. And so I want to thank you, John. It's been really fascinating. It wasn't something I had hardly any real knowledge about the industry, which is why I want to do it, because let's say 1,000 people listen to this, that's potentially 1,000 people that now know a lot more about it. And actually, it's not only exciting, it's important, it's crucial.
So one thing, James, I should probably do before I go, and it's differentiate SuperNode from every other cable, superconducting cable companies, because there are several others who are established and sell products today. Yeah. And if Mark Bracknell wanted a superconductor and had a checkbook and wanted to buy one, someone would sell you one. What differentiates SuperNode is they all use a particular type of pipe or conduit to flow the liquid nitrogen, which keeps the superconductor cool 24/7. And that is it's a good technology, but it's distance limited in that it's corrugated, so it impedes the flow of the liquid nitrogen. And what SuperNode have innovated, developed, and patented is a polymeric, so effectively a plastic solution which can do the same job, cycle up and down to -200, but it's smooth bore. So it's lighter, it's cheaper, and it goes further. So we like to think of it as being half the price and 3 times the performance. So what we've done is taken superconducting technology, which is mature and at a level that you could buy it today, and taken it to a new level to extend its range and capability. And that's what SuperNode have done. That's different from what's there today.
Yeah, amazing. I wish you all the best, John, because I think it's a fascinating project. It's great to have in the Northeast in Blythe. I think the future looks bright, and I'm looking forward to seeing it all unravel and be there. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers, Mark. Take care and have a good Christmas.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. It absolutely means the world to me. Please let me know if you need any assistance. As a business, we look at providing partnerships with manufacturing engineering companies to really help their recruitment and retention. On the recruitment piece, anywhere from blue-collar, semi-skilled staff, right the way up to C-suite level executive appointments, but also much more than that. We run events, so please let me know if you're interested in any of those. If you are interested, indeed, becoming a podcast guest, be very, very keen to speak to you as well. More than happy to do so. But as a business, as I say, we look at key partnerships to really help your recruitment, your retention, your marketing, your training. We really believe in the partnership piece and being an extension of your business. So we're very proud to work in this sector. I love manufacturing engineering, and my staff are just as passionate about it as I am. So thank you once again for listening. Please get in touch to talk about anything we can do to help. Look forward to speaking to you very soon. Thank you.